Admiral Patricia Hayes stood at the massive viewing window of the UES Horizon and watched the last transport ships leave the Kepler station. The station had been humanity's largest research facility in the Outer Rim, home to 15,000 scientists and their families. Now it floated empty in space, its lights dimming one by one as the automated systems powered down. She pressed her hand against the cold metal wall and felt the vibrations of the ship's engines. In 6 hours, the Horizon would make its final jump out of this sector. After that, no human ship would return to these coordinates. The thought should have made her sad, but Patricia felt only a strange sense of relief. Dr. Marcus Stone walked up beside her, carrying a datapad filled with evacuation reports. His gray hair looked messy, and his uniform was wrinkled from 3 days of non-stop work. Marcus had spent 20 years studying alien diseases at Kepler Station. He had saved millions of lives across dozens of species. Now he was leaving it all behind. The Zephyrian Medical Facility is officially closed, Marcus said quietly. I left all our research files in the main computer. If they want to continue the work, they can figure it out themselves. Patricia nodded but said nothing. The Zephyrians had been dying from a plague for 2 years. Human doctors had been working around the clock to find a cure. They were close to a breakthrough when the Galactic Council made their latest demand. Now the Zephyrians would have to save themselves. The communication panel near the window buzzed. Softly, Patricia walked over and pressed the activation button. Captain Lisa Morgan's face appeared on the screen. Lisa was supervising the evacuation of the Centauri Research Complex, humanity's oldest outpost in alien space. Admiral, we're finishing the final shutdown procedures, Lisa reported. All personnel are aboard the transport ships. We've wiped the main computers but left basic operational manuals for any species that wants to use the facilities. Any problems with the local authorities? Patricia asked. Lisa shook her head. The Valdorians barely noticed we were leaving. They think this is just another human temper tantrum. Their exact words were, the children will return when they realize their proper place in the cosmic order. Patricia almost smiled at that. The Valdorian Empire had ruled this sector for 3,000 years. They considered humans to be useful. Servants, nothing more. The idea that humans might leave permanently was beyond their understanding. Complete the evacuation and rendezvous with the main fleet, Patricia ordered. We jumped to the exit coordinates in 18 hours. Lisa saluted. And the screen went dark. Patricia turned back to the viewing window. In the distance, she could see the lights of other human facilities going dark one by one. Research stations, diplomatic outposts, trade centers, and military bases. All of them abandoned. Marcus cleared his throat. Admiral, I have to ask. Are we really doing the right thing? There are billions of innocent people in this galaxy who depend on our help. Patricia turned to face him. Marcus was a good man with a kind heart. He had dedicated his life to helping others. Walking away from suffering went against everything he believed in. Marcus, how long have we been the galaxy's problem solvers? She asked. Since first contact about 230 years ago. And in all that time, have the other species learned to solve their own problems? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. No, I suppose they haven't. The Valdorians still can't negotiate a trade agreement without human mediators. The Ethereal Collective calls us every time their ancient technology breaks down. The Rigelian Federation depends on human engineers to maintain their communication networks. After 2 centuries, they've learned nothing. Patricia walked to her command chair and sat down. The bridge around them was busy with officers preparing for departure. Everyone moved with quiet efficiency. There was no panic, no last-minute regrets. The human evacuation had been planned for months. 6 weeks ago, the Galactic Council demanded that we hand over our artificial intelligence technology, Patricia continued. They said it was too dangerous for one species to control. They wanted us to submit to protective oversight by the elder races. Marcus nodded. He remembered the emergency session where the council had made their ultimatum. Humanity could either surrender their most advanced technology or be expelled from the galactic community. What they didn't understand is that we've been protecting them from things they can't even imagine, Patricia said. Our AI systems monitor the galaxy's borders for extra-dimensional threats. Our early warning networks watch for signs of invasion from outside the galaxy. Our defense grids protect the core worlds from cosmic radiation storms. She pulled up a holographic display showing the galaxy's outer rim. Red dots marked the locations of automated monitoring stations. Blue lines showed the patrol routes of human ships. Green circles indicated the coverage areas of defensive installations. All of this will go offline when we leave, Patricia said. The other species don't even know these systems exist? We've been fighting threats in the shadows for decades. Marcus stared at the display in shock, the Void Hunters at the galactic edge. The report said they were just legends. They're real, and they're always testing our defenses. Without human ships patrolling the rim, without our monitoring stations sending warnings, the galaxy will be blind to what's coming. The communication panel buzzed again. This time it was Fleet Commander Jake Peterson calling from the UES Defiant. Jake was in charge of coordinating the Exodus fleet, making sure every human ship and civilian transport reached the rendezvous point safely. Admiral, we have confirmation from all sector commands, Jake reported. Every human facility in the galaxy has been evacuated. Total personnel count is just over 42 million. All ships are accounted for. Patricia felt a weight settle in her chest. 42 million people. The entire human presence in the galaxy was leaving behind everything they had built. Homes, research facilities, relationships with alien friends, centuries of shared history. All of it abandoned because the galaxy's leaders couldn't accept humanity as equals. Outstanding work, Commander Peterson. Signal all ships to prepare for the jump to exit coordinates. Understood, Admiral. There's one more thing. We're receiving some communications from individual species asking about our departure schedule. Nothing official from the Council, just curiosity from lower-level officials. Patricia wasn't surprised. The galaxy's leadership was too proud to ask questions directly. They'd probably assumed humans would change their minds at the last minute. After all, where could humanity go? This galaxy was the only home they had ever known. Ignore all communications, Patricia ordered. We've said everything we need to say. The screen went dark and Patricia turned back to the viewing window. The last transport ships were disappearing into hyperspace. Soon the horizon would follow them. Marcus stood beside her, still staring at the holographic display of humanity's hidden defenses. What happens when the other species realize what we really did for them? He asked. Patricia touched the controls and the display vanished. They'll figure it out eventually. The question is whether they'll figure it out in time. The ship's engines began to hum louder as they prepared for the jump to hyperspace. Patricia felt the familiar sensation of the gravity generators adjusting for the transition. In a few minutes, the US horizon would leave this sector forever. She looked out at the stars one last time. Somewhere out there, beyond the galaxy's edge, humanity's scouts had found new worlds. Empty worlds where humans could build something different, something better. The galaxy had made its choice. Now humanity would make theirs. 6 months had passed since the last human ship disappeared from galactic space. Ambassador Helen Carter's empty chair at the Galactic Council chamber had become a symbol that nobody wanted to acknowledge. The massive hall where representatives from hundreds of species gathered to discuss galactic affairs felt strangely quiet without the human delegation. Prime Councillor Valdus of the Valdorian Empire stood at the central podium and tried to maintain his usual commanding presence. For 3,000 years, his people had dominated galactic politics. The absence of one species should not have mattered. Yet somehow the council sessions felt incomplete. The quarterly trade reports show concerning trends, Valdus announced to the assembled delegates. Communication delays between core worlds and outer rim territories have increased by 40%. Several trade routes are experiencing unexplained technical difficulties. In the Rigelian sector, Chief Engineer Morak stared at his control panels in growing frustration. The quantum communication arrays that connected his world to the galactic network were failing one by one. These systems had worked perfectly for over a century. Now they were shutting down faster than his teams could repair them. Morak pulled up the maintenance records on his screen. Every major repair and upgrade had been performed by human technicians. The documentation was thorough, but reading about quantum field stabilization was very different from actually fixing the equipment when it broke. "Sir, we've lost contact with the Deneb relay station," reported his assistant. "That's the sixth one this week." Morak rubbed his forehead with his tentacles. Without the communication network, interstellar trade would become impossible. Ships would have to carry messages by hand like they did in the primitive ages. The economic impact would be devastating. Meanwhile, on the border between Solarian and Draconi space, two fleets faced each other across the empty void. The territorial dispute that humans had mediated for generations was erupting into open warfare. Without Ambassador Carter's diplomatic skills, neither side was willing to back down. Captain Fail of the Solarian defense force watched enemy ships positioning themselves for attack. His orders were clear: defend Solarian territory at all costs. The humans who had prevented this conflict for decades were gone. There was nobody left to negotiate a peaceful solution. "Enemy vessels are charging weapons," his tactical officer reported. "All ships prepare for combat," Fail ordered into his communicator. "Today we settle this dispute once and for all." The first shots of what would become the Solarian Draconi War lit up the darkness of space. Within hours, both fleets were locked in brutal combat. Within days, the conflict had spread to a dozen star systems on the core world of Ethereal Prime. The ancient collective's greatest minds gathered in their crystal chambers. For millennia, they had considered themselves the galaxy's wisest species. Their technology was older than most civilizations. Their knowledge was vast and deep, yet their cities were experiencing cascading failures that their scientists could not explain. Power grids designed by human engineers were overloading. Environmental systems that had worked flawlessly for centuries were breaking down. The automated defense networks protecting their world from cosmic radiation were offline. Elder Zephyros materialized in the central chamber, his ethereal form flickering with concern. "The maintenance protocols left by the humans are incomplete," he reported to the assembled council. "Our technicians cannot restore full functionality to the planetary systems." The other elders exchanged worried glances. They had always believed their technology was superior to anything the younger species could create. The discovery that humans had been secretly maintaining their most critical systems was deeply disturbing. Far from the core worlds, aboard the colony ship New Earth, Captain Sandra Bell stood in the observation lounge and watched the stars of their new home galaxy grow brighter. The human Exodus fleet had traveled for months to reach this destination. Behind them, the galaxy they had called home for centuries was becoming just another point of light in the cosmic darkness. Dr. Marcus Stone approached her with a datapad in his hands. His expression was grim as he handed her the latest sensor. "Readings. Sandra, you need to see this." The data showed energy signatures from the edge of their old galaxy. Strange, pulsing emissions that matched no known technology. The patterns were subtle but unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. "Void hunter activity," Sandra said quietly. "How extensive?" Marcus pulled up additional screens showing the progression of the signals over time. "It started small, just probing actions along the outer rim. But the activity is increasing exponentially. Without our early warning systems, the galaxy won't detect them until it's too late." Sandra closed her eyes and tried to push away the guilt. Somewhere behind them, billions of innocent people were going about their daily lives. They had no idea that an ancient enemy was preparing to invade their space. The monitoring stations that would have given them warning were dark and silent. "How long before the main assault begins?" she asked. "Based on previous patterns, 6 to 8 months, Marcus replied. "Maybe less if they encounter no resistance." Back in galactic space, the failures were accelerating. On Kepler Station, the automated medical systems that had been treating the Zephyrian plague shut down completely, without human doctors to maintain the complex equipment. The cure that had been so close to completion slipped away. The Zephyrian government sent desperate messages throughout the galaxy, begging for medical assistance. But no other species had the expertise to continue the research. The plague that humans had nearly defeated began spreading again, claiming thousands of lives each day. In the Arcturus system, the agricultural worlds that fed half the galactic core experienced their first crop failures in generations. The environmental controls that maintained perfect growing conditions across dozens of planets were malfunctioning. Food production dropped by 30% in the first month alone. Colonial Administrator Keth watched his world's grain harvests wither in the fields. The human technicians who had designed these systems had made them incredibly efficient. But efficiency came at the cost of complexity. When something went wrong, there was nobody left who understood how to fix it. Send a message to the Galactic Council, Keth ordered his communications officer. Request immediate technical assistance. For our agricultural systems? The message joined thousands of others flooding the Council's emergency channels. Requests for help with failing infrastructure, collapsing trade networks, and technological breakdowns. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Admiral Patricia Hayes received all of these distress signals aboard the UES Horizon. The human fleet's long-range sensors could monitor communications from their old galaxy. Every day brought new reports of systems failing, conflicts erupting, and civilizations struggling with problems they had never learned to solve alone. Admiral, we're receiving direct communications from individual planetary governments, reported Communications Officer Janet Walsh. They're bypassing the Galactic Council and asking us to return. Patricia stared at the list of incoming messages. Hundreds of worlds begging for human assistance. Species that had barely acknowledged humanity's existence were now pleading for their help. What's the official response from the Council itself? She asked. Janet checked her screens. Nothing. No official communication from the Galactic Council at all. Patricia wasn't surprised. The Council's pride would never allow them to admit they needed humanity's help. They would watch their civilization crumble before asking the humans to return. But the individual species were starting to understand. The mysterious technical failures, the communication breakdowns, the sudden inability to solve problems that had seemed routine. It was all connected to humanity's departure. The galaxy was beginning to realize that humans had not been servants or junior partners. They had been the invisible foundation holding everything together. And now that foundation was gone. In the depths of space, beyond the galaxy's rim, the Void Hunters sensed the change. The barriers that had held them back for decades were weakening. The Watchers who had detected their movements were silent. It was time to feed. 1 year had passed since humanity walked away from the galaxy, and engineer Paul Clark stood in the communications center of the UES, defiant, monitoring the emergency channels. The screens around him showed a galaxy in complete chaos. Red warning. Lights indicated 12 species that had completely collapsed. Yellow markers showed dozens more teetering on the edge of destruction. Paul adjusted his headset and listened to the desperate transmissions flooding the airwaves. The hive mind of Kepler 442 had descended into madness without the psychiatric stabilizers that human doctors had developed for them. Their collective consciousness was fragmenting, and they were attacking everything in their path like a diseased organism consuming healthy tissue. Admiral Hayes to the communications center, came the announcement over the ship's intercom. Paul saved his monitoring data and walked quickly to the main conference room. The human leadership had been meeting more frequently as the reports from their old galaxy grew worse. Admiral Patricia Hayes sat at the head of the long table, her face showing the strain of carrying impossible decisions. Around her sat the other senior officers who guided humanity's Exodus fleet. Dr. Marcus Stone looked exhausted from analyzing the medical disasters spreading across galactic space. Captain Lisa Morgan had dark circles under her eyes from reviewing military intelligence reports. Paul, give us the latest communication summary. Admiral Hayes said. Paul activated the main display and pulled up his data. In the past month, we've documented the complete collapse of 6 major trade routes. The Rigelian Federation has lost contact with over half their member worlds. The Valdorian Empire is fighting 3 separate civil wars as their outer provinces. Revolt? He switched to a medical report. The Zephyrian plague has now spread to 14 species. Without our research facilities, they're using primitive treatments that are making the disease stronger. Current death toll estimates are approaching 50 million. Dr. Marcus Stone leaned forward. Show them the agricultural data. Paul brought up charts showing food production across the galaxy. Crop failures are cascading through the core worlds. The automated farming systems we designed are breaking down faster than local technicians can repair them. We're looking at galaxy-wide famine within 2 years. Captain Morgan stood up and walked to the viewing window. What about military conflicts? The Solarian Draconi War has expanded into a 5-system battlefield, Paul reported. Without human peacekeepers, old territorial disputes are erupting everywhere. The Outer Rim Confederation is fracturing as member species blame each other for the infrastructure failures. Admiral Hayes rubbed her temples. Every report was worse than the last. The galaxy was tearing itself apart without the stabilizing influence that humanity had provided for centuries. But the worst news was yet to come. Dr. Rebecca Lane, the fleet's chief strategist, entered the conference room carrying a sealed data case. Her security clearance allowed her access to the most sensitive intelligence gathered by human deep space scouts. She placed the case on the table and entered her authorization codes. Admiral, we've confirmed our worst fears, Rebecca said as the case opened. The Void Hunters have begun their invasion. The room fell silent. Everyone knew this moment would come, but hoping and knowing were different things. Rebecca activated a holographic display showing the galaxy's outer rim. Dark shapes were moving inward like a spreading infection. Our deep space monitoring stations went dark 6 months ago, Rebecca continued. Without them, the galaxy had no way to detect the initial probe attacks. The Void Hunters have been systematically destroying outlying settlements and studding galactic defenses. She zoomed in on specific sectors. 3 entire star systems in the Perseus arm have gone silent. Not destroyed, empty. The Void Hunters don't just kill their victims, they consume them completely, leaving nothing behind. Captain Sandra Bell, who commanded the exploration vessel UE's Pioneer, raised her hand. What about the automated defense? Grids we left behind? Offline, Rebecca replied grimly. The maintenance protocols we provided weren't enough. Complex defensive systems need constant adjustment and upgrade. Without human engineers, they've been sitting targets. Admiral Hayes stood up and walked to the holographic display. She had spent decades studying Void Hunter tactics during her time as a military intelligence officer. Their invasion patterns were always the same: probe, isolate, consume, advance. How long before they reached the core worlds? She asked. Rebecca manipulated the display to show projected invasion routes. At their current rate of expansion, 18 months. Maybe less if they encounter no organized resistance. Dr. Stone looked up from his medical reports. The galaxy doesn't even know they're being invaded. The species that might have detected the Void Hunters are too busy fighting each other or dealing with system failures. The bitter irony was not lost on anyone in the room. Humanity had spent centuries preparing the galaxy's defenses against this exact threat. Early warning systems, automated defense platforms, coordinated response protocols. All of it was designed to give the galactic community time to organize a unified defense. Now those systems were dark, and the galaxy was blind to its approaching doom. Captain Morgan turned from the viewing window. We're receiving direct communications. Again, individual planetary governments asking for help. Admiral Hayes nodded. What's different about these messages? They're not asking for technical assistance anymore, Morgan replied. They're begging us to come back and save them. Some are offering complete political surrender in exchange for protection. Paul pulled up examples of the incoming transmissions. The governor of Arcturus Prime sent this message yesterday. To the human fleet, wherever you are, our world is dying. Our people are starving. We formally request annexation by human space. We will accept any terms you require. Similar messages were coming from dozens of worlds. Species that had considered humans inferior were now offering to become human colonies. The proud Valdorian Empire had sent secret envoys offering to make humanity their ruling class in exchange for saving their civilization. What about the Galactic Council itself? Admiral Hayes asked. Paul shook his head. Still nothing official. But we're intercepting their internal communications. They're in complete chaos. Half the member species have stopped attending council sessions. The other half are demanding action that the council can't provide. Dr. Lane brought up intelligence reports from the core worlds. The ethereal collective has suffered the worst losses. Their ancient technology was more dependent on human maintenance than anyone realized. 3 of their core worlds have been completely evacuated. She showed images of empty crystal cities that had once housed billions of beings. They're calling it the Great Silence. Entire populations have simply vanished as their life support systems failed. The meeting continued for hours as more reports came in. Every piece of data painted the same picture, a galaxy in its death throes, consuming itself from within while an ancient enemy approached from without. The species that had dismissed humanity as useful servants were now faced with the true cost of their arrogance. Captain Bell spoke up during a brief pause in the reports. Admiral, I have to ask the question everyone is thinking. Do we have any obligation to help them? The room fell quiet again. It was the question that had been haunting every human leader since the Exodus began. Billions of innocent people were suffering and dying because their governments had driven away the one species capable of helping them. Admiral Hayes looked around the table at her senior staff. These people had dedicated their lives to protecting others. Walking away from suffering went against everything they believed in. But they also had a responsibility to the 42 million humans under their command. The scout reports from our new colonies are positive, she said finally. We've established thriving settlements in the Andromeda approach. Our people are safe and building a new future. She paused and looked at the holographic display still showing the Void Hunter invasion routes. But if the galaxy falls, those creatures won't stop there. They'll continue expanding until they find us. Dr. Stone leaned back in his chair. So we're not really safe until the threat is eliminated. That's correct, Admiral Hayes confirmed. The question is whether we try to save a galaxy that cast us out, or whether we prepare our defenses and let them face the consequences of their choices. The debate that followed would determine the fate of 2 galaxies. Outside the conference room windows, the stars of humanity's new home shone brightly in the cosmic darkness. But behind them, in the galaxy they had left behind, ancient shadows were stirring. The Void Hunters were coming, and this time there would be no hidden guardians to stand in their way. 2 years had passed since humanity left their old galaxy behind, and Governor Amy Roberts stood on the observation deck of New Terra's capital city watching the sunrise over humanity's first major colony world. The city below her stretched for hundreds of kilometers, its gleaming towers and green spaces representing everything humans could achieve when freed from galactic politics and restrictions. The communication panel beside her chimed softly. Amy activated the display and saw Admiral Patricia Hayes calling from the Fleet Command ship UES Horizon. Behind the Admiral, Amy could see the busy activity of the main bridge where officers monitored long-range sensors and communication arrays. Governor Roberts, we have a situation developing, Admiral Hayes said without preamble. Long-range scouts have detected a large fleet approaching our position. They're not Void Hunters. Amy felt her stomach tighten. Who are they? Survivors from the old galaxy? Our preliminary scans show ships from at least 12 different species. They've been traveling for months to reach us. The implications hit Amy immediately. If survivors were fleeing to human space, it meant the situation in their old galaxy had become truly desperate. She had hoped they would have more time to build their new civilization before facing these kinds of decisions. How many ships? Amy asked. Over 300 vessels. Most of them are civilian transports packed with refugees. But there are also military escorts and what appear to be government evacuation ships. Amy nodded grimly. I'll prepare the council chambers for an emergency session. How long before they arrive? 6 hours, Admiral Hayes replied. Amy, there's something else. One of the ships is broadcasting identification codes for the former Prime Minister of the Valdorian Empire. They're requesting permission to dock and present a formal diplomatic proposal. The irony was not lost on Amy. The Valdorian Empire had ruled galactic politics for 3,000 years. They had treated humans as useful servants and had been among the loudest voices demanding that humanity surrender their technology. Now they were coming as refugees seeking human protection. General Keith Barnes materialized on a second communication screen. As humanity's military commander, Keith had been coordinating defensive preparations for their new colonies. His weathered face showed the stress of managing an impossible situation. Governor Admiral, we need to discuss our response options, Keith said. Our intelligence reports from the old galaxy are getting worse every day. The Void Hunters have consumed over 60% of inhabited space. What's left of galactic civilization is in complete chaos. Amy walked to her office window and looked out at the peaceful city below. Families were going about their morning routines, children were walking to schools, workers were heading to jobs in the research facilities and manufacturing centers that were building humanity's future. All of this would be at risk if they got involved in the galactic crisis. What's the military assessment of our defensive capabilities? She asked. Keith pulled up tactical displays. We've been preparing for this possibility since the Exodus began. Our new shipyards have been producing vessels with technology that's generations ahead of what we had before. Without galactic restrictions, our research and development has accelerated dramatically. He showed her images of the new human fleet. Sleek ships that move through space like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Weapon systems that could target specific molecular structures. Defensive shields that bent space-time itself? The problem is numbers, Keith continued. Even with our technological advantages, we're still one species against an enemy that has consumed dozens of civilizations. If the Void Hunters finish their conquest of the old galaxy, they'll have unlimited resources to throw against us. Admiral Hayes joined the conversation from her ship. There's another factor to consider. We've been monitoring Earth. Amy's breath caught. Earth, humanity's birth world, had been abandoned during the Exodus, but never forgotten. The planet held too much history and emotional significance to be completely written off. What's happening to Earth? Amy asked. Void Hunter scouts reached the Sol system 3 days ago, Admiral Hayes reported. They're not attacking yet, just studying. But based on their behavioral patterns, the main assault will begin soon. The weight of that information settled on Amy's shoulders. Earth, the cradle of human civilization, was about to be consumed by an alien nightmare. Every major city, every historical site, every reminder of humanity's origins would be devoured and turned into raw material for the Void Hunter fleet. Dr. Rebecca Lane appeared on a third screen from her research vessel. As the fleet's chief strategist, Rebecca had been analyzing the political implications of the refugee crisis. Her expression was troubled as she presented her findings. Governor Admiral General, we need to face reality, Rebecca said. The approaching refugee fleet includes representatives from every major galactic power. They're not just asking for help anymore. They're coming to surrender. She displayed intercepted communications from the refugee ships. The ethereal collective has formally dissolved itself. The Valdorian Empire has declared a state of emergency and transferred all authority to whoever can save their remaining populations. Even the proud Rigelian Federation is offering complete political integration in exchange for protection. Read through the surrender documents that were being transmitted ahead of the refugee fleet. These were species that had considered themselves superior to humanity for centuries. Now they were offering to become human subjects, human colonies, or even human property if it meant survival. What about the individual planetary governments that stayed behind? Amy asked. They're fighting a losing battle, Rebecca replied. Without unified command or proper defensive coordination, they're being picked off one system at a time. The Void Hunters have learned to target communication networks first, so the remaining worlds can't even coordinate their resistance. General Barnes brought up tactical projections. Our analysis suggests that organized galactic resistance will collapse completely within 4 months. After that, it becomes a simple cleanup operation for the Void Hunters. The three leaders continued their discussion as reports continued to pour in from their old galaxy. Captain Tony Walsh, leading the long-range reconnaissance missions, transmitted real-time footage of Void Hunter feeding operations. Entire worlds being consumed down to their molten cores. Their populations and resources converted into more ships and weapons for the expanding fleet. Amy made her decision. Admiral Hayes, when the refugee fleet arrives, grant them permission to dock at the orbital stations. But all refugees remain in quarantine until we can verify their intentions and screen for any possible security threats. Understood, Governor. General Barnes, what would we need to mount an effective resistance against the Void Hunters? Keith consulted his strategic databases. We'd need the cooperation of every surviving species in the galaxy. Unified command, structure, integrated technology sharing, and coordinated defensive strategies. Basically, we'd need to create the kind of galactic government that never existed before. And they'd have to accept human leadership, Rebecca added. We're the only species with the experience and technology to coordinate a defense of this scale, Amy nodded slowly. The galaxy that had rejected human equality was now faced with the choice of human leadership or complete annihilation. The refugees approaching their space represented billions of people who had finally learned the true cost of their prejudice. There's one more thing, Admiral Hayes said quietly. Captain Sandrabell's deep space reconnaissance has detected something. Beyond the Void Hunters, Amy felt a chill run down her spine. Beyond them? The Void Hunters aren't the apex predators we thought they were, Admiral Hayes explained. They're running from something else. Something that makes them look like prey animals. The full scope of the crisis became clear. The galaxy was being consumed by an enemy that was itself fleeing from an even greater threat. Humanity had walked away from one problem only to discover a cascade of disasters that threatened not just their old home, but potentially the entire local galaxy cluster. Amy looked out at New Terra's peaceful city one more time. In a few hours, representatives of the galaxy's surviving civilizations would arrive seeking salvation. They would offer humanity unlimited power over the survivors in exchange for protection from forces beyond imagination. The question was whether humanity would accept the burden of galactic leadership, or whether they would continue to focus on building their own future while the cosmos burned around them. Outside her window, the sun reached its zenith, casting sharp shadows across the city below. Soon those shadows would be filled with the desperate and the powerful, all looking to humanity for answers that might not exist. Admiral Patricia Hayes stood in the main conference chamber of New Terra Station and watched as the representatives of 12 galactic civilizations filed in through the main entrance. These beings had once commanded the respect and fear of entire star systems. Now they came as refugees, their clothes worn from months of travel, their faces marked by desperation and loss. Former Prime Minister Valder of the Valdorian Empire walked slowly to the human delegation table. His proud bearing remained, but his golden ceremonial robes were stained and torn. Behind him came Elder Zephyros of the Ethereal Collective, his usually bright energy form dim and flickering. The other representatives looked equally broken by their experiences. Patricia had made her decision. During the sleepless night before this meeting, the debate among human leadership had been fierce and emotional. Governor Amy Roberts had argued for accepting the refugees but maintaining neutrality in the galactic conflict. General Keith Barnes had pushed for military intervention to eliminate the Void Hunter threat before it could reach human space. Dr. Rebecca Lane had advocated for a complete evacuation of the galaxy, abandoning it to whatever forces were coming. We come before you not as your equals but as your subjects, Valder said as he approached the conference table. The Valdorian Empire formally surrenders all sovereignty to human authority. We ask only that you protect our surviving populations. Elder, Zephyros stepped forward next. The ethereal collective offers our remaining knowledge and technology in exchange for sanctuary. We acknowledge human superiority in all matters of governance and defense. Similar declarations came from each representative. Species that had ruled for millennia were offering complete political surrender to the humans they had once considered inferior. The irony was overwhelming, but Patricia felt no satisfaction in their humiliation. Your offers are noted, Patricia replied formally. But before we discuss terms, you need to understand what you're asking us to do. She activated the main display screen and showed the latest intelligence reports from the old galaxy. The Void. Hunter invasion had accelerated dramatically. Over 70% of inhabited space was now under their control. The remaining free worlds were isolated pockets of resistance that would fall within weeks. Our analysis indicates that stopping the Void Hunters would require resources equivalent to rebuilding galactic civilization from scratch, Patricia continued. Even with our technological advantages, the cost in human lives would be enormous. Captain. Lisa Morgan stepped forward from the human delegation. There's also the matter of what comes after the Void Hunters. Our deep space reconnaissance has detected the entities they're fleeing from. Whatever those forces are, they make the current invasion look small. The alien representatives exchanged worried glances. They had been so focused on the immediate threat that they hadn't considered the larger cosmic situation. The revelation that the Void Hunters were themselves refugees was deeply disturbing. Dr. Marcus Stone addressed the gathering from his position at the science station. We've been monitoring the progression of the invasion using our hidden sensor networks. The Void Hunters aren't just consuming worlds randomly. They're following specific patterns that suggest they're preparing defenses against something approaching. From extragalactic space, Patricia watched the faces of the alien delegates as the full scope of the crisis became clear. They weren't just asking humanity to save them from one enemy. They were asking humans to stand against a cascade of threats that could potentially consume multiple galaxies. However, Patricia continued, we've also been preparing for this possibility. She changed the display to show the human fleet that had been secretly built in their new colonies. Ships unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, incorporating technology that humanity had developed in isolation. Vessels that could bend space-time, weapons that could target specific molecular structures, and defensive systems that operated on principles the old galactic community had never imagined. Our shipyards have been working at full capacity since the exodus began, General Barnes reported. We've built a fleet specifically designed to counter Void Hunter tactics. But deploying it means committing to a conflict that could last decades. Captain Sandra Bell stepped up to present the military strategy. Our plan calls for a three-phase operation. First, we establish a defensive perimeter around the surviving galactic core worlds. Second, we launch coordinated strikes against Void Hunter staging areas to disrupt their expansion. Third, we prepare long-term defenses against whatever forces are driving them. The alien representatives listened in growing amazement as the humans outlined their preparations. In 2 years of exile, humanity had not only survived, but had built the foundation for a military campaign that could potentially save the galaxy. The cost of this operation would be enormous, Patricia warned. We would need complete authority over all surviving galactic resources. Every ship, every world, every population would have to follow human command without question. Valder nodded immediately. The Valdorian survivors accept these terms completely. The ethereal collective agrees, Elder Zephyros added. Human leadership is our only hope for survival. One by one, each representative formally surrendered their species' independence to human authority. The galaxy that had rejected human equality was now begging for human dictatorship. Patricia felt the weight of 42 million human lives and billions of alien survivors settling on her shoulders. The decision she made in the next few minutes would determine the fate of multiple civilizations. There's one more condition, she said finally. Earth The room fell silent. Everyone knew that Earth, humanity's birthworld, was currently under siege by Void Hunter forces. "Our first priority will be the liberation of the Sol system," Patricia declared. "Earth will not fall to these creatures. Every human ship, every piece of advanced technology, every strategic resource will be committed to saving our homeworld first." Captain Tony Walsh stepped forward with the latest reconnaissance data. "Void Hunter forces are positioning for a final assault on Earth. We have perhaps 72 hours before they begin the consumption process." Patricia turned to face the alien delegates. "If you truly accept human leadership, then you accept that human priorities come first. Earth's salvation takes precedence over every other objective." The representatives agreed without hesitation. They had no choice. Their own worlds were already lost or beyond saving. Earth represented their only chance of having any world to call home. "Then we return to the galaxy," Patricia announced. "Not as saviors, not as conquerors, but as the species that has always stood between civilization and the darkness." The human fleet began its preparation for the journey back to their old galaxy within hours. Ships that had been built in secret. Weapons that incorporated decades of hidden research and strategies that no enemy would expect. The galaxy that had watched in terror as humanity walked away would now watch in hope as humanity returned. But this time, humanity would not be the galaxy's servants or partners. They would be its rulers, its protectors, and its final hope against forces that threatened the very structure of local space. Captain Mitchell led the advanced fleet toward the edge of their old galaxy while Admiral Hayes coordinated the main battle group. Behind them came the refugee fleets of a dozen species. Following humanity toward an uncertain future, the Void Hunters had consumed most of a galaxy, but they had never faced humanity unleashed. The species that had once hidden their true capabilities behind diplomatic necessity was returning with the full force of their technological and strategic genius. Earth would be saved. The galaxy would be reclaimed. And whatever cosmic forces were driving the Void Hunters would discover that humanity was not prey to be consumed, but a predator that protected its own. The galaxy had watched in terror as humanity walked away. Now it would watch in wonder as humanity came home.